All right, is everyone ready?
Ready.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So glad to be here with you today. How's my noise level? Is it good? All right. Wow, it is hearing my voice very loud and proud. There we go. So welcome. I am Christina Franz. For those I don't know, I am a CSR ESG DEI executive. I've had the pleasure of leading socially and environmentally responsible strategies for companies like Empower Retirement, Janice Henderson, the Denver Post, and most recently Twilio. Sorry for your stock price with Twilio if you own our stock. And today I am so happy to be here with this amazing, amazing panel. So let me introduce them quickly for you. First, we have Deb Dowling, Vice President, Community Relations for Kroenke Sports and Entertainment and Executive Director of the Kroenke Sports Charities. Then we have Bruce Glazer, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer for Kroenke Sports and Entertainment. Then we have Helen Drexler, President and CEO of Delta Dental Colorado. And finally, Adib Khan, Chief Brand and Impact Officer for Delta Dental of Colorado and Executive Director of the Delta Dental Foundation. As a reminder, before we get going, all workshops will be recorded and resources mentioned will be available after the summit in the Excel Events platform that all attendees have access to. We'll save time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, so if you've got questions throughout, write them down, hold them till the end. For those who are virtual, please send your comments and thoughts in the chat feature on the right-hand side and ask your questions in the dedicated Q&A section so we can make sure we get them answered. And don't forget to share what you're learning on social, tag BCivic, and share what you've learned. All right, are we ready to get started? Get out any of those wiggles that you're feeling. Here we go. So Helen and Bruce, to help set the stage, can you share with us what your leadership team looks like?
I'd be happy to. So for Delta Dental of Colorado, which is our core business, I really have 5 senior leaders around the table that drive the business of oral health for Colorado. And that includes my chief financial officer, because they don't let me in charge of the checkbook. I was never good at balancing it in my younger days. A chief operating officer, which is a new role at Delta Dental of Colorado, and we're really excited to have a new chief operating officer that kind of manages all things operations for the company. A chief HR officer or chief people officer that's actually being recruited for right now. And then a chief growth officer, which is basically sales, but really important for us to grow not just our core business sales, but new business, new diversified business products. And then our chief impact officer and brand officer, and the man who has the longest title at Delta Dental of Colorado, Adib Khan. He has 2 business cards when you talk with him because his title is that long. But Adib is taken over responsibility for marketing and the brand, as well as the impact, which is important to us as a nonprofit. So that's basically my C-suite.
Great, thank you. Bruce.
Thank you. So on our side, it starts with Stan Kroenke, who is our owner, and Josh Kroenke, who is his son. And I think things kind of emanate down from that. At the top of KSC, Matt Hutchings, who's our chief operating officer, Tamego Collins, who is our our executive vice president of communications and business strategy, and then myself from a financial standpoint. And then that drops down into a level of EVPs and SVPs for sponsorship, marketing, operations, risk management, kind of all the other areas in which we operate. And then in Colorado, we also have a group called Outdoor Sportsman Group, which is 3 TV networks and 15 print magazines. And then I probably would be remiss in not indicating that also our organization is kind of spread fairly wide across the United States and Canada and England also, with Arsenal Football Club, with ranches in Canada, and then commercial real estate operations and public storage operations. So I guess I would say we're a very flat and entrepreneurial structure.
Fabulous. Well, we're all here today because we all believe that CSR leaders, ESG leaders should be in the C-suite. So we commend your organizations for really leading the way. Bruce, we all love the Rapids. We all love the Avalanche, the Mammoths, the Denver Nuggets, whoop, whoop, our beloved sports teams. And we've probably been to an event at Ball Arena or at Dick's Sporting Goods Park. But folks may not know that Kroenke Sports and Entertainment is the brand behind all the magic. Can you share more about Kroenke Sports, its purpose, and your role in making it happen?
Absolutely. I guess how I would characterize it would be everything really here revolves around the teams and the leagues in which we participate. So I think the magic comes from the players and the coaches and the leagues, and we get to, as Kroenke Sports, get to support what our teams do. And so whether that be events at Ball Arena or Dick's Sporting Goods Park or First Bank Center or the teams that you mentioned, all those aforementioned people kind of are behind what makes that magic happen. We probably have, and Deb, you can correct me on this one, but I think the Arena Bowl is probably busy, probably 240, 250 days a year, 280 days a year. 365 days a year, I'm sure. I have been in there when there's nobody in there, but that's, but I do think that, you know, the people that make it happen are a collaborative group that comes together to not only sell the tickets, but we probably have the greatest conversion crew in the United States. And I've seen us go from basketball to hockey to lacrosse in the same day. So, and I've seen us do, you know, a basketball game, a concert, and hockey in a weekend. So it's a very collaborative effort by probably 900 people plus all of our part-time staff.
Mm-hmm. And Deb, tell us a bit about corporate social responsibility with Kroenke.
Well, we're a discretionary income business. You know, you don't have to come to a game, a concert. And so I think that we look at being good neighbors, you know, that it's our honor and our privilege to respond to the community and make the community a better place. And there are so many familiar faces in this room. It's just so fun to see people in person. And because I've been in this space for so very long, I think you all have heard my statement of we're good at sizzle, and we hope that we have the good sense to find people that are good at substance, and that's who's sitting around these tables. So we look for programs that are substance, that make the community better, and we come in and try to partner with them and enhance your mission.
Well, looking forward to getting more into that. Helen, Delta Dental of Colorado is the largest nonprofit dental provider. Excuse me, saying Delta Dental fast. Do you have to practice that? Delta Dental. Okay, here we go. Let me try again. Delta Dental of Colorado is the largest nonprofit dental provider here in Colorado and is a well-known supporter of local communities. Can you share more about Delta Dental of Colorado's mission and work?
Yep, I would love to. I can talk about oral health and dental stuff all day long, actually. But what's really interesting is so much of what I've learned about oral health, I really didn't start learning until 6 years ago when I became the CEO of Delta Dental of Colorado. We are 65 years young. We have always been not-for-profit, and we've always really believed in our mission of oral health, that every Coloradan deserves a healthy smile. But the reality is that not every Coloradan can get access to affordable, high-quality oral health care. And so as a not-for-profit, tax-exempt organization, our obligation really fundamentally is to the community. And for many years, Delta Dental set sort of a standard of half our profit goes back to the community. We did that through funding of our foundation, and the foundation has also really evolved in terms of its mission and its focus. When I first arrived, the mission was to eradicate childhood caries. I didn't even know what caries was when I arrived. It is the medical term or the diagnosis for tooth decay. It is the most chronic condition in children. And it's 100% preventable. And a lot of children with caries don't always get access to the care they need to treat it. Now, that was a big mission to eradicate a disease. We haven't done that in a long time. And even polio is getting a little bit of a comeback, sadly, in some countries. So We also looked at the issue of equity, and the foundation then made a big transition in its mission to elevate the well-being of all Coloradans by advancing oral health equity. And that really gets at the heart of every Coloradan deserves a healthy smile, regardless of social status or life experience. We fully believe that our job is to continue to make a community impact with our mission and our brand and our profit. And that's what makes it so awesome to come to work every day, to really make sure everyone can have a healthy smile.
Well, you all really do. And turning to Adib, who's at the helm of that work, you are the executive director of the foundation in addition to being in the C-suite. How do both organizations view CSR? Is it an aligned approach?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things for me coming into this role was it was specifically designed to create that alignment, to have somebody who understood the nuance that was happening with the foundation and the mission around oral health equity, but also understood what we were trying to achieve as a business, as a dental insurance provider, a nonprofit dental insurance provider. And so what we've really tried to hone in on over the last few years is having, dedicated focus and specific component for each. Now, the foundation in many ways operates as an independent organization. We have our own board of directors, although 5 of those board of directors come from the company board, and then we have 4 community members. So we create some of that outside input towards the work that we're doing. But we tried to have created and structured the foundation to really be dedicated to its mission, which is advancing oral health equity. And so with that, we have strategic data collection and evaluation work that we do, much like many foundations you would see doing. We have a policy arm, which are really trying to advocate for policy, again, which is a component that you'll see more on the philanthropic side from trying to create systems change work. And then we're doing grant making and low interest loans, really dedicated towards our nonprofit organizations that are driving change in oral health equity. So it operates like it's an independent strategic foundation, and we try to incorporate strategic best practices of what the foundation community, what philanthropy is doing into that work. And then the CSR side is really more focused on, generally speaking, responsible business practices. What do we need to be doing as a company to ensure that we are adhering to the kind of highest levels and standards around responsible business practice? So that incorporates things like our team member engagement, volunteering in the community, sponsoring and supporting organizations where we live and work, really focusing on things like sustainability and ensuring that we achieve carbon neutrality, focusing on our inclusion, equity, and diversity work as a company. I would say there is some overlap with our inclusion, equity, and diversity work for sure, as well as things like volunteerism and engagement, which are just fundamental values we carry as an organization as a whole. But there are different strategic approaches for each. And that's what I think makes both of them successful in what they're trying to do.
Thank you for sharing that. Deb, you have a similar role in that you are the ED of Kroenke Sports Charities, as well as having a role on the corporate side. We also know you've had several roles within Kroenke over your tenure there. Can you share a bit about how your role has evolved and pivoted over time?
Yes, if I can turn on my mic. I think that, it's evolved because the world has changed somewhat. And Christine, that was a very nice way of saying, you're really old.
No way, no.
You've had a lot of jobs.
Experience.
So I'm just very, very fortunate in that I'm a Colorado native and that I've been able to find a space to work in even before it was called social responsibility, it was called public relations or public affairs or things like that. It's all about using the platform that you have to improve your community. And I think it's basically sit back and listen, understand what's needed in your community. Every community is different. Each one of the leagues has their own platforms that they ask their teams to activate, but then they say, we know what works in Brooklyn might not work in Denver. So you tell us how you can make that work. And just looking back at the last 3 years that every one of us lived through when our world changed dramatically, because we're a sports team and we use that as our platform to try to encourage education, to encourage fitness. that all changed when the kids weren't in schools and leagues weren't playing and our building was empty. But what became paramount of importance was that people were hurting. People were hungry. They'd lost their jobs. And so we were able to convert our parking lot into a food distribution system every Friday, and we called it Food Fridays. And it was sad and yet uplifting at the same time when we would see cars lined up an hour before we opened. But then every single week, we heard from new purveyors that said, I've got XYZ. It started out with, we have some milk, it's going to spoil. Can you help us get out into the community? To when we ended it, it was food, it was clothing, it was healthcare items. And just to see Colorado's amazing, Denver's amazing. We are one of the most giving communities, and that's because our leaders are the people that are seated in this room. And I commend every single one of you for flying that banner of I care about the community. And yes, it's important to our corporate image. We are, while we might not be seen as a revenue generating department, we are the most important revenue generating department, because if people don't believe in who we are and what we're doing, they're not going to support us. So that's totally not on any of my notes. I just got up on my soapbox, but just basically listen to the people that you're serving, and you will never regret it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so much about CSR at a company is really being able to leverage core competencies of the organizations and assets. And so I think it's such a remarkable example that you all pivoted and opened up your parking lots, that we have space and we have people in need who need food. And love that you did that. Thank you so much. Adib, you've had a major impact on Delta Dental during your tenure. Talk about the evolution of your role and what your responsibilities are today.
Yeah, so I started, my title was longer. I think it had more words. It was Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility and Executive Director of the DDCO Foundation. I think I lost a word or two in there in the process, but this year, Helen was kind enough to promote me to Chief Brand and Impact Officer. And that's kind of incorporated a lot of change that we've seen over the last few years, especially on the company side. And so, you know, Helen has always understood the importance of how corporate responsibility as a nonprofit insurance provider needs to be infused in everything that we do. And we need to have that expertise and that understanding and that skill set to be involved in a lot of our work. And so over those years, I've taken on some additional roles and responsibilities. That has included the inclusion and diversity work, which really took and launched in earnest in 2020, and really built out our I&D Council, and I talked a little bit about that this morning. I've also taken on the marketing and brand team, because at the end of the day, this is a competitive differentiator for our work. We are a nonprofit. We are transparent. We are held accountable to some different standards in the way we operate. And that's something that we welcome, and that's something that we encourage, because we want to be a responsible business, because we feel like that is a differentiator for us in the marketplace. And so incorporating our responsibility work into our brand was in some ways a no-brainer for us. And so I've taken on the marketing communication roles, also facilities. With our work towards sustainability, it was hard for us to really achieve a lot of our goals of what we were trying to do, from a reduction of our energy consumption, reduction of our water consumption, without necessarily having kind of the full purview of how we operate from a facilities perspective. So that's been another component that's also rolled into us. And I just want to mention that none of it would really be possible without just a great team that I have at Delta Dental of Colorado. And it includes the fact that we've promoted 3 individuals to higher roles so that we can have a more impactful role. That includes Andrea Miller, who was on the last session facilitating, who's become a director and has taken on a lot of those components around facilities and our work in I&D. It includes promoting Megan Wilson on our foundation side to deputy director. You know, being a 50% foundation executive director with a team that's highly skilled and highly competent is very challenging. And so having Megan Purview as a deputy director, which was a new role, really helped that. And that goes to as well our senior director now of marketing communication, Allison. These individuals are terrific, and having a great team has made us the effective team that we are now in trying to really instill those values across the organization into many different areas.
So I want to go off script for just a little
Sure.
bit because I know you can handle it, Adib. If there are people in this audience who are a senior manager, a director, a VP right now, what advice would you give them for making the business case that this role should be in the C-suite?
I think you have to understand the business fundamentals is really what it comes down to. I think it takes a deep understanding how corporate responsibility drives business outcomes,
Yes.
whether that be in who the people are we're bringing into the organization and if they have value alignment. It's understanding the consumer demand and the direction that consumer demand is going and being able to articulate that from a sales strategy, from a marketing strategy. It's not just for those individuals, we have to be the champions in order to drive this work. And the only way we're going to be effective in doing that is if we understand the business case from every component within the organization. And I think the more time you spend really learning that, looking at examples and case studies around the world, looking at consumer demand and the direction that that's going in, and being able to speak from a finance perspective, from an HR perspective, from a marketing perspective, I think is the best thing that you can be doing to really elevate the work. Because at the end of the day, the fundamentals usually can't be ignored. And so we need to be able to speak in some of those fundamentals.
Love that. Great answer. Can you tell to us too about, we've had a lot of names for community relations, community support, social responsibility, social impact. Now we've got ESG. How does ESG factor into your department and your strategy?
Yeah, and I think, ESG is just another way of being able to add some sophistication to how we think about corporate responsibility in some cases. So I think that's fundamental. I don't think, we should be categorizing things like corporate responsibility as just like feel-good philanthropy, and ESG is like more tightened, locked, like, incorporation to all of our roles, because it's not that clear. What ESG does do is it allows us to operate within global standards, things like our GRI reporting standards, things like when we look at our investment standards. There's very specific categories within the E, within the S, within the G that we need to be compliant to, and we want to hold ourselves to those standards. So we adopt ESG as a way of being able to look at each category as a way of being accountable to our board and to our stakeholders. And so we're looking at essentially renaming our group on the CSR side ESG, just from a way to get us more rigor in the work. I'll also say that on the foundation side, we have a significant reserve bank that's not as significant as it was a year ago, thanks to Twilio and others, but I'm not going to get into that. But I will say we have this year converted our entire portfolio on the foundation to ESG investing. Every dollar that we have in the foundation side is going towards ESG. And on top of that, it's been a way for the company to look at its reserves and be able to say, all right, maybe our board isn't fully ready to go down that path, but now we can see how well the foundation does with this process. We can learn from it, we can understand it, and then we can incorporate those practices so that we're balancing our risk portfolio at the same time.
Can I speak to that just for a second?
Yes,
Because
please.
that actually, that definitely requires a couple snaps because that was a big deal when our board, not just the company board, but the foundation board went down the path of talking about ESG investing and impact investing. One of my first foundation board meetings on impact investing was whether or not we should pull out from our portfolio sugary beverage stocks, tobacco stocks. And I remember that meeting and I remember thinking, gosh, intuitively that makes sense. Like, how can we be a foundation but have sugary beverage stock in our portfolio? But the board at the time was really like, oh, no, we can't do that. We do our impact by making sure we're taking care of eradicating caries. And it's like, yeah, but sometimes sugary beverages in a baby bottle is what's causing caries. So at the time, we were not ready as a board to sort of lean in to what that meant to make that decision. And we didn't have an advisor at the time who could help guide us on how to make that decision and how to get there over time. You don't have to go 100% in. You can You can look at the things that are important to you and begin moving in that direction. 5 years later, both boards really spent time learning, understanding, becoming aware of what impact investing can be, is, should be, want it to be. And now we are making those decisions really boldly, with a little bit of risk, but actually not as much risk as I thought at the time. And it feels aligned. And that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish, I think, with ESG in the C-suite, is how do you get the alignment of your values with your business practices? And I believe ultimately when you do that, you're going to win big in a lot of different ways than just the balance sheet.
Yes. And to your point, yeah, should we give that a round of applause? It's so true. And I really want to just call attention to the fact that you're saying as a CEO, this is hard. This is not easy. This is not stuff that we can do overnight. And we're being confronted with a lot more challenges right now than we've ever had to deal with as an organization. So I'm really glad to have you on the stage too, Helen, after Adib spoke about how he made the business case for having CSR in the C-suite. How did you think about it at the time? And why do you think having CSR in the C-suite is so important?
So when I first came to Delta Dental of Colorado, I think I just brought that conviction with me. But at the time, it was an add-on job to our executive director of the foundation. When we began the search for the role that Adib is in, it became very clear to me that I wanted it to be 50-50. And it was very much a deliberate part even of the interview process, because I needed to make sure I could have a leader who could do both and do it equally. Now, you could argue no job is ever really 50-50. It's like 100-100. And now he has 3 jobs, so it's 100-100-100.
Somebody get that on tape. So I just need that for the next.
But he doesn't get 3
negotiating
times
round.
the salary. Just yeah, we all have to learn, right, to ebb and flow when we're in jobs where it's 50-50. And because some weeks it's 90-10 and some weeks it's 10-90. And that's the reality of juggling those 2 things. So I never doubted that CSR had to be in my boardroom or in my, in my boardroom and in my C-suite, because I knew CSR was so much bigger than just community impact. It was all the things that are now evolving into environmental, social, and governance. And I'm just excited that we've been able to do it. And frankly, sometimes I just trusted my gut and went for it. It wasn't necessarily a textbook thing that said, oh, you should do this. I just knew intuitively that these were important qualities that we should be talking about. Because if you're only talking about the OKRs and the objectives and the goals, you're probably missing a whole lot about the community that you're serving and what we are in service to do.
Yes. This is a great time, I think, Bruce, to turn to you and ask as CFO, how do you see CSR contributing to your bottom line as Kroenke Sports and Entertainment?
So I would probably characterize, and our organization is different than Delta because we don't have a board. We have an owner, and that owner, I think Deb would attest, has always been, I think from day one, committed to ESG. I mean, just in who he is and how he operates. So I think if you characterize our company, our companies, it would be probably doing well by doing good. We've always been very active on the community, as you said, various names, but community relations. And Deb is the person that makes that happen. So I just want to state publicly, part of that magic is Deb makes that happen and has for years. And she has all these jobs because she never gives up a job. She just keeps adding to it. But I think our organization, I mean, I look at us as a company that has it ingrained in what we do. So whether that, and Deb's got, I've got a list, but I mean, and Deb will expand on some of it, from day of service to the board work that we do, to the work that our players and our coaches and our staff do in the community. The sustainability initiatives that we've started, the diversity and inclusion committees that we've started, Kroenke Sports Charities, you know, just to maybe look back at a couple items. During the pandemic, we were the Dick's Sporting Goods Park and Ball Arena were 2 of the 5 largest testing sites in the state 2 of the 5 largest vaccination sites in the state. And during the pandemic, we also opened up Ball Arena as a voting precinct. So, you know,
Fantastic.
sometimes called upon, sometimes we just knew that it was needed and volunteered it. And one thing I would say about ownership is during the pandemic, we've got probably a couple thousand employees across the United States, probably 1,100 in Colorado. We didn't have an event inside the arena for probably 12 months. We didn't lay a person off, we didn't furlough a person, and nobody took a pay cut. So, and that made us able, thank you. That made us able to be able to do Food Fridays and continue day of service and do all the things that we do. So I think it's just kind of ingrained in what we do and who we are.
Well, the community feels that for sure. Speaking of the community, I know that one of the things your employees love, Deb, is your day of service. Can you tell us a bit about that and how it's impacted our community?
We're fortunate to be able to do 2 days of service every year, one in the summer, one during the holiday period. And our department will set up projects to send our employees out. And in those days, we figure that each time we go out, because we've got a good employee database, we'll end up donating between 1,000 and 1,200 hours of service. And one of the things I always say, it's a safe way to volunteer. We have a very, very young workforce for, I don't know what the percentage would be, but I'd say first professional job outweighs much more than those that have been around for a long time. And so, you know, we look at it as our privilege to kind of acquaint our group, our family, our coworkers with the community. And so we have these 2 days of service every year, but then it's not, okay, 2 and done. Yesterday, we hosted our annual Special Olympics Nuggets basketball clinic. And this event has been going on for more than 35 years. The Nuggets were the first team in the NBA to form a partnership with Special Olympics. And it's, you know, skills stations on the court led by our players and our coaches. And we had the entire ticket sales department came down and formed the fan tunnel. So if you've been to a Nuggets game back before COVID, you got to see that there was always a fan tunnel formed with kids giving the players high fives as they ran out onto the court. Well, yesterday, it's not about our players. It's not about our coaches. It's about the Special Olympic athletes. And so they had a very long fan tunnel that was comprised of our ticket sales department with signs of encouragement and high fives as they ran out onto the Nuggets court. And that's just, you know, one example. Whenever we need help, we're very, very lucky in that we have a great community that we can turn to, and they'll bring food for our canned food drive. During the pandemic, we were it was before drive-through events were a hot thing. I think we all know how to do, you know, drive-through events now. North High School reached out to us, and in the rite of passage of graduation, they couldn't have it. And so because we had an empty parking lot, we turned it into what did we call it? It was something very clever that I can't think of right now. But it was a drive-through graduation, and our employee base came out and was cheering on the kids as they drove through the parking lots wearing their caps and gowns. So I think communication, you know, communication has gotten, it's always been difficult because you get so focused and you've got your to-do list, and but to talk amongst yourselves, to let your employees, they're your hugest cheerleaders. If you just tell them what you're doing and let them go out and tell the story and be proud of where they're working. We've got great resources. Let's not deny it.
I am sure that your employees have a lot of pride working for Cronky Sports because of the opportunity to engage in the community.
I think they do, and I think Day of Service has also kind of turned into an opportunity for employees to experience the opportunity to go do some good, but also sometimes they become involved with the charities themselves and go onto those boards, and we encourage that because I think that really helps our folks get in the community and gain an appreciation for it's not all about sports, it's not all about entertainment, it's not kind of all about glamour. There's another side to our organization, there's another side to the community that needs that help.
Yes. And employees today want to work for organizations that are purpose-driven and that are giving them the opportunity to make a positive impact. And Helen, along those same lines, I would love for you to talk a little bit about how CSR has helped with employee maybe attraction, retention during a time where there is really a worker shortage and an unstable economy.
I was just thinking about volunteerism and how to engage your team members, but also the important reminder to those of you who are working in this space and building a culture of volunteerism inside your organization, to also remember that we ask a lot of our team members. We have to be equitable in how we ask and what we ask of the different levels in your organization. And for me, what has become a really rude awakening is, and I'm going to pivot this a little bit from our discussion earlier, but what I've become really aware of is there are team members who work for my organization who are facing food insecurity themselves, housing insecurity. My guess is that's true for every organization represented in this room today. And so when we have a food drive, or we fill baskets for United Way, or we go out and volunteer, or we take up contributions for a United Way campaign, whatever it is that you're asking your employees to participate in, we also have to come from a place of empathy and understanding where each person is at within your organization. So that has become more and more relevant for me as I grow in my career, as I have more means, have more things at my disposal. I have to always remember that customer service rep making $20 an hour, supporting 3 children, maybe, in a bad situation home-wise, like what does that look like for her or him? And how can we ask them to contribute in something that makes them feel like they belong, that they're part of something bigger than themselves, but whatever they can give is fine, even if it's $1 or 1 can of something from their pantry, and then collectively we build on that. I don't know how many of you remember the Stone Soup story, childhood story, but it's one of my favorites, and I used it with customer service because I am the leader of the customer service team that is going to bring in the highest number of baskets for United Way. I'm going to win.
Competition.
And so we have this healthy competition, but at the same time, I'm leading the team of my employees that's probably that lower paid of all employees within our organization based on the job. And I had to be really sensitive to how I came and asked for them to participate in this challenge. And I think that that's important because volunteerism and the culture of that is important. I do think people come to work at Delta Dental because they love working for a nonprofit and the mission and being able to do these kinds of things. And not everyone can do everything all the time. And we have to be okay with that. So that's, for me, it is a draw. We see it in our Net Promoter Scores all the time. People do say, I love working for a company that pays me to go volunteer in the community. I love a company that matches my donations to my passion, even if it is Denver Dumb Friends League. Not that I have anything against pets, but I never understood the link between oral health care and pets. Now I do, because it's well-being. I get it now. Just don't expect me to bring my pet to work, because I don't have one.
I can tell this is part of your evolution that Adib has probably taken you on. It looked like Adib, you wanted to comment there on that.
No, I think the point of having the opportunity for our team members to give and volunteer where they are passionate about is an important one. I came from a previous company doing corporate responsibility work, and we tried to really get everyone excited about specific initiatives that were focused on the company's strategic agenda and brand. And that's good, but we can do that to some degree, and we can make sure that we are just providing those opportunities for our team members to get engaged in the community. And to the point Bruce brought up earlier, we absolutely do it with an intention of converting our team members from a one-day volunteer to somebody who's now donating, to somebody who's getting on a committee, to somebody who's potentially getting on a board, because creating those authentic connections for our people with organizations they care about has the greatest value back for us, because that's what a team member is going to remember and appreciate about the company when we can have our corporate responsibility initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Adib, can you talk to us too about how you continue to evolve and advance your CSR and ESG missions of both organizations?
Yeah, I think, trying to find maximum impact, I think, is always an opportunity for us, things that we can do on the foundation side and on the company side that are going to work off of each other. So for example, our foundation has 3 specific initiatives, 3 focus areas that we're going long-term in. And one of those focus areas is on workforce diversity. So if any of you guys have looked at oral health care and studied kind of the employment in oral health, it's predominantly white dominated. The higher paid jobs are predominantly white. 95% of dentists in the country are white. Over 85% of our hygienists in the state of Colorado are white. And a lot of that has to just do with just the history of things and how we've created systems for how people get into careers. But if you look at a hygienist, you only have to go to school for 2 years to be a hygienist. And you're starting these days making $85,000 a year. And by the time you're working a couple of years, you're making over $100,000. That's a great opportunity for economic impact. And so we took on the role of being able to say, how do we create a better pipeline for our populations of color, our BIPOC populations of color, to be able to get into the workforce? And we do that for a number of reasons. We do that because a more diverse workforce is a better serving workforce in the healthcare industry. And we do that also because there is a huge shortage in many industries. I think we know this, we're seeing it in a lot of different ways, but with hygienists specifically, the American Dental Association is calling it a crisis because a lot of individuals have left the workforce from COVID, and historically there have not been enough new dental hygiene programs at the college level that have done a good job also of recruiting new communities into it. So we've made a significant investment to create 3 new schools of dental hygiene in the state of Colorado with a specific focus on recruiting BIPOC populations into the program and graduating them. And hopefully this will really help our dental community because they need more workers. They are struggling, and it causes a degree of decrease in quality of care. And so if we can improve the quality of care that we're providing for our folks who are covered and our members at Delta Dental, but at the same time serve this greater need by creating more avenues and opportunities for our communities of color that haven't existed in the past, then we're able to maximize the impact of what both organizations are doing together.
Isn't that cool? Wow, yes. That is such a bold initiative, and I'm sure we'll have a very tangible impact in our community. So thank you.
You're all invited to the ribbon cutting down in Colorado Springs next year.
Oh, all right.
It's
Free
gonna be
drinks on a
awesome.
deep?
We'll get
Great.
a bus.
Okay. Okay, so get ready.
Fluoridated water for everybody.
Carbonated water. Well done, Adib. You've got 3 jobs. You can handle it. All right, so start thinking of your questions. I'm going to ask the panel one last question, and then we'll turn it over to all of you. So I think for many of us in this group, we still feel a little bit like CSR might be on the side or siloed. What one key piece of advice would you give people in this room about making the case for having CSR at the leadership table? Who would like to start?
I'm happy to go.
Let's go. All right.
We talked about it earlier. I think it's really understanding a deeper idea of business case. I think this was an interesting example. When Andrea and I brought up the plan in 2020 to our senior leadership team to say we want to go carbon neutral, we want to achieve carbon neutral certification, in the deck itself, I made it clear that we weren't going to talk about climate change. It wasn't going to be a social issue that was necessarily going to be driving us. It was going to be strictly based on the business fundamentals of why we did it. So we looked at data like how many companies in Colorado have adopted a sustainability plan of some sort, and what is the trend line looking on those companies in terms of adopting sustainability plans within the organization. And I'm sure to no surprise of the folks here, we've seen it was like 85% increase in 2020 of the number of companies within the previous year that had adopted some type of green initiative within the organization. So these are the companies that we're trying to acquire business from. And as we all know, we try to seek out vendors and folks that we want to partner with on the business side who have shared values. And so for us, when we talk to sales about why we want to go this direction, we just shared the business case of, you are going to be differentiating yourself when you go into that final interview and try to get us to sell the case. And that's going to be one of those things that differentiates us at the end of the day on top of everything else that we're doing. So again, I go back to that, understanding those business fundamentals, because I think a lot of us get frustrated because we know it. We know that, you know, we can recruit better talent, retain talent, for example, but we need to really hone in on that from a strategic. We need to understand the cost, we need to understand the return on the investment, and we need to be able to present that from those components and not just because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's really going to what helps elevate things from a higher level.
I would say 3 words to a CEO who isn't sure if they should have CSR at their table. Your future consumer, period. You cannot think 20 years out and not expect that your future consumer is going to be dictating what they expect of you as it relates to whether or not you are a good corporate citizen. I just ask any car company why they're converting. It's because the 5-year-olds are going to be buying their first car in 11 years. And if they don't have what that 5-year-old wants in 11 years, they're in trouble.
I would say in how I would think of it would be, for our organization, would be our future employees. Our employees want balance. They want to go to work for a company they can be proud of. Everybody likes, you know, we have a natural advantage. People want to work in sports and entertainment. And everybody comes to work thinking that they're going to know the players and know the team and know the coaches and have something to say about who gets drafted, which doesn't happen. But I will say that in order to recruit the best and the brightest in our organization, we have to be conscious of the fact that people that are coming out of schools and are coming out of high schools and colleges are sustainability conscious, and they're conscious of diversity and inclusion. And it's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do, but it's also what is good for our organization.
We're in a business of passion, and it's good passion and bad passion. You know, what was the score last night? Oh, I can't take it. They drive me nuts. But it's also, I've been a lifelong sports fan. I've been a lifelong fan of the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs, and I love baseball, which is why I'll never work in baseball because I want to think it's pure. The Cubs, I'm not a fan of theirs because they win. You know, it took 108 years. And it's the way they're playing right now, it's going to take another 108 years. But I had a boss that said, you're more important to the organization, your department is more important to the organization when we're not playing well, because you're creating the fans of the future. And, you know, thinking about a player coming and reading to a classroom, which we did with Meredith when she was at Reach Out and Read. We're creating people that are passionate about a cause, people that are passionate about a company, and it's fun. It's fun to be on the fun side of it. And I know that every organization doesn't have the fun or the agony, and you're not living on the, you know, the cusp of everything. But I would say, listen, believe, and always choose kindness. If you have kindness as your baseline, you are not going to ever make a mistake.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, team, your turn. Do we have questions in the audience for this great panel? There we go. We've got one in the back. I can repeat it for you if there's not a mic.
Next question, why am I volunteering when I'm struggling
Mhm.
So how do you make programs accessible for your employees and maybe Crunchy too, for them to have access to those opportunities, but we have to also be mindful that there's a pride in that, right? They don't be like, I need to ask for help, right? Because I work for a great organization, but how we also do the work in-house to support them and for them not to feel ashamed that they're asking for help.
At Delta Dental Colorado, we've begun to realize that these issues run probably deeper than any of us would like them to, but they're real and they're just part of the current state of things in our country, in our community, in our city, in our state. And so what we've done is we brought in Workforce Solutions, a program that actually does provide some coaching, counseling, and helping for anyone at any level that's struggling with whatever it is they are struggling with or what they need. It could be someone who wants to buy a house and just needs some financial coaching or counseling or access to resources. It could be someone who literally is food insecure and isn't sure how to deal with that, or domestic violence situation. You know, one of the things I love about the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work that is emerging and growing and changing every day in workplaces across America is this notion of you don't have to check your life at the door and come to work and be a robot. I was sharing with someone earlier today that when I had my son 33 years ago, almost to the day, I was a new manager and I went to a conference and my husband was able to come with me so he could stay with Gary in the room where I could go and do my work and be the manager that I wanted to be and put on my big shoulder pads and, blue jacket and a blue tie because you had to kind of look like the guys. And I had to sort of, check at the door the fact that I had just had a baby. Like, what is up with that? And so now we get to bring our full self to work, which means it's going to be messy, right? Childcare challenges in our city today. I have many one-on-ones with my executive assistant when her baby's on her lap some of the time because of childcare issues or it closes. We don't check ourselves at the door anymore. Thank goodness, right? But it also means that we're going to bring some of the messiness with us into the workplace, and we have to run a business. We have to get the job done. But I think we do have to think about what it means to be a work family that truly allows everyone to feel like they belong, even if it means you put on the t-shirt and you support the food drive, but maybe you only bring one can or the stone to go in the pot of the stone soup, right? That's okay too. We're doing it together. And maybe next year, when things are better in your life and things have gotten more stable, you can bring 2 cans, but I can bring 20 or 200. This is 1 + 1 = 3. It has been my mantra since I wanted to become an organizational development psychologist. I'm bad at math, but I do believe we are greater than the sum of the parts in our workplace. And that's how you meet people where they are. When they feel like maybe they can't volunteer because they need help, you provide benefits that give them help with respect and dignity, and you get the job done.
Thank you.
I'm pretty passionate about that.
Well, then it was a good question for you. Anyone else? Okay. Other questions? There we go. Elizabeth?
Hi, Elizabeth Burch. I'm with the Colorado Nonprofit Association. I'm curious if and how conversations have changed with your nonprofit partners based on, of course, the pandemic and inflation, and what those relationship adjustments have had to be, or what those behind-the-scenes conversations with your trusted partners have really looked like in recent months.
I'll take that one. I think, many times a nonprofit, because our name is Cronky Sports and Entertainment, they'll initially call thinking that the piggy bank is open that day and we're just taking numbers and come on down and pick up your money. But we have so many in-kind programs. And while it might not be writing a check, we want to listen to you. What is it tell me about your organization. I love in the summer, we call it our informational meeting time. And it used to be that we could actually go out to nonprofits and see their facilities. And I'm hopeful that that will happen again as the world continues to open up. But, let's tell me about who you are, what your goals are, what are you really trying to do? And it might be that I can't do this for you, but you know what? If I know more about you, I think about several years ago, A Precious Child had just started, and Karina, the founder, came, and her idea was, we've got some kids, and it'd be really great if at holiday times, Nugget players could host a party for a few of our kids. And it was like, that's, that is a great idea, but why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you do? And she went through, the programs that they had. And at that point, one of the programs was called Give Sports. And so it's like, well, tell me more about that. And it's making sports with equipment and sports scholarships. And it's like, we don't have anything right now, but it's just good to learn about you. Well, if it wasn't 2 months later, and the first time we had the fires in Boulder, and there was an intern at Altitude Sports and Entertainment who said playing sports returns kids back to their normal lives. So I want to do a sports equipment drive for hockey equipment. And it was like, well, that's great, but we're going to do a sports equipment drive for all kinds of sports equipment. We just finished our 11th annual Give Sports Equipment Drive, and that has now become a core of who we are in making sports accessible and so it's just a matter of, I wouldn't have known anything about A Precious Child and Give Sports if it just would have been, I can't partner with you on the Nuggets Christmas party, or I can, and then that's it. So it takes a little bit more to go a little bit deeper, but just ask the questions of, what is it what are you trying to accomplish? And many times the nonprofits they won't realize all that they do themselves. And then they come back, and we can help promote, we can help do different things. So once again, it's just going back to listening and being flexible.
Okay. Oh,
I'll add just a
you've got
short.
20 seconds.
So I came from a nonprofit background. I spent 10 years working in the nonprofit sector. And the reason why I moved into CSR, went back, got my MBA, was because I was frustrated with how companies worked with, oftentimes was more self-serving than it was kind of being focused on the nonprofit. So the way we've engaged on the corporate social responsibility side, almost every dollar we're donating, unless there's maybe a sponsorship benefit tied to it, is unrestricted. We really try to work with those organizations year after year. We have a different nonprofit partner every month that we try to highlight, teach our people about, get them engaged with. And so we really try to really understand the needs of the organizations and build our programs around trying to get regular volunteers for them versus just the one-time transactions. And then on the foundation side, it's really about listening deeply, and we try to employ practices that are geared towards trust-based philanthropy and understanding the needs of the organizations and being able to kind of work with them as we move forward instead of really dictating how we operate with the organizations.
And scene. That was a great panel. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. It was wonderful. If you'd like to learn more about anything we've talked about on this stage, you're welcome to come up and say hello, introduce yourselves afterwards. After this are our sponsor remarks and keynote here in the ballroom. It will start at 3:45. So use the restroom, get some refreshments, come back in here at 3:45. And one more round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much.